Hi, BookTube. Welcome. Welcome to another fiction review. BookTube, I need to report a happy accident. I just got hit by a speeding novel. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the fastest narrative that I have ever read. And it's my own fault, really, because I know the safety rules. When you are in new reading territory, it's a good idea to take a look around first. Get to know the area. But I didn't do that. I just opened up the covers, having done no internet research beforehand, and I had no idea this book was going to come at me at the speed that it did. Today, we are looking at Oreo by Fran Ross, first published in 1974, republished in 2015 by Pan Macmillan. I'm intimidated by my own first review question because it's asking me, can I pitch this novel? I don't quite know where to start. What I thought I would do is give you a tribute to the author. I'm going to attempt to describe Oreo with a Fran Ross-like list of adjectives. And here they are. We've got futeki, Japanese, meaning fearless because no subject is taboo in this novel. Heavy, that's a 1960s idiom meaning deep, intellectually cool. Pythonesque, I was thinking of the Monty Python show because it's zany, this book, it's surreal, you never really know what's going to happen next. Kibitzing, Yiddish, because there's much joking. Schmackhaft, German, appetizing because there are lots of tasty descriptions of food. Explicito, Spanish, because yes, there are scenes that are sexually graphic. And acrobatique, because this is a fast-paced narrative. It leaps from one transition to another very quickly. Let's look now at our protagonist, Christine Schwartz, nicknamed Oreo, and she's a polyglot, a wit. She's got the intellect of Sherlock Holmes. She's got the cool assurance of a James Bond. She is the perfect mythic hero. When she turns 16, her black mother takes her aside and gives her a list of clues that she needs to follow, and Oreo sets off on a mock epic journey to find her estranged Jewish father in New York City. Book details, book details. How long is it? How did I get it? How much did I pay? Well, the Picador Macmillan paperback that I bought was 212 pages long. The font is large, it's bold, and it's centered in a lot of white space around it, which I thought itself might be a play on the whole Urban Dictionary concept of Oreo-ness. The chapters are short also. There's a lot of subheadings and there are other breaks in the narrative. Be very sympathetic, this book, to the kind of reader who already knows they're going to get frequent interruptions. And there are lots of visual diversions, right? There's a quiz. There's a 5-page long dinner menu. There's a page of textbook math word problems. Okay, maybe not so exciting, but there are billboards, there are box labels, warning signs, song lyrics, newspaper headlines. In short, I don't think you'll get bored. I bought this book at the Sochi Hall Street branch of Waterstones in Glasgow, and I paid the full price of £9.99. Now, I had a look on Amazon, and that was informative because Oreo has been translated into German, Portuguese, French, Dutch, Spanish, and Italian. The UK English version is £4.99 right now on Amazon. If you're going to Amazon.com, the paperback will cost you $13.90, and the Kindle version will cost you $9.99. Okay, the author. Fran Ross was born in Philadelphia in 1937. She grew up in the northern part of the city where at the time housing discrimination had created kind of a mixed black Jewish neighborhood. And the photo that you can see at the bottom of the screen here is a page from her Temple University yearbook where she studied journalism. So you can already see the ethnic mix reflected there in the pictures. Oreo is a real showcase for Ross's knowledge of Jewish food, Jewish customs, Yiddish vocabulary. In 1960, Ross moved to New York City. She got a job with the Saturday Evening Post as a copy editor. She also wrote a bit of comedy for a local comedian, but she went on the lookout to meet writers that she admired, and particularly James Baldwin, who she did meet. But all this was kind of behind the scenes stuff. That is, she was making other people look good, but she wasn't being recognized for her own writing ability. Now that changed in 1968 when Ross and her partner Anne Griffel-Coney founded a small production company. Griffel-Coney had been a teacher, and she and Ross shared a common passion for making multimedia materials that could be used in schools to help with interracial understanding and the empowerment of young women. And I wish I could say that Fran Ross's story gets better, after Oreo was published in 1974. But when it came out, the critical reaction reminds me so much of what happened to Kamala Markandeya's Nowhere Man. The New York Times and the other major newspapers ignored Oreo completely, said nothing, and even the positive reviews. And I'll leave a link. There's a fantastic biopic of Fran Ross in the Los Angeles Review of Books, and you can look through that. And it talks about the reaction in 74. And even the positive reviews, they still seem to feel like they needed to make excuses for the book, particularly for its brazenness. So Fran Ross continued to try and write. She briefly moved to Los Angeles. She was offered a contract to write for the comedian Richard Pryor because he'd been offered a contract by NBC to do a television series. That series got cut a little short, didn't run for as many episodes as it was supposed to. And after that, as the Los Angeles Review of Book puts it, the paper trail for Fran Ross, it goes very thin. You can find a few articles in magazines and published short stories. And then sadly, she was diagnosed with lung cancer in the early 80s, and she died in 1985, aged only 50. Setting. What can I say about the setting of this book? At the back of the novel, Fran Ross has created this section that she titles A Key for Speed Readers, Non-Classicists, etc. And then she explains in some detail how the novel's plot points and the characters, they're all a reworking of the classical myth of Theseus, but set, of course, in 1970s Philadelphia and New York rather than in ancient Greece. The settings matter, therefore, it's just because they're contemporary. That's how they're helpful, because they've got more technology and scientific improvements, and that allows for some very different ways in which our Theseus, who is Oreo, of course, different ways that she can get what she wants and keep out of danger, those two important things for any mythic hero. And being a mythic retelling, this isn't a novel about Philadelphia or New York. I don't think anyone who grew up in those cities during the 1970s is going to get any nostalgic benefit from reading the book, except when Fran refers to subway or bus routes, because that might have been based in reality. In fact, that may be one of the few aspects of her book that is anchored in something boring and mundane. Because there's just nothing dull about this book. If we go on now and talk about the narrative, in fact, we could make a whole video just to discuss the text and the different things Ross is doing with it. The viewpoint is third person, and the narrator very early on establishes a Black identity for themselves. On page 3, they put up a color table, which I thought it'd be better to put on screen rather than to try and describe. You'll get the idea as you look at it. And of course, there's this note at the bottom which says, there is no very black. Only white people use this term. To blacks, black is black enough, and in most cases too black, since the majority of black people are not nearly so black as your black pocketbook. If a black person says John is very black, he is referring to John's politics, not his skin color. If you've ever been unsure exactly what postmodern means when you're talking about fiction, I'd say Oreo is as good a textbook example as any. The narrative, yes, it moves in chronological order, but the movement is erratic. It sometimes jumps in short paragraph hops from one topic to another and then back again to go forward again. Sometimes it interrupts the story altogether, inserts a document or an equation of all things, and there's much play on words. Lots of playing with language. Sometimes characters speak one language in the syntax of another, or you get mashups of spelling conventions or cadence between two languages. Ross loves lists. She includes lists in description, in dialogue, in correspondence, and you'll get everything from 1940s film cowboys to penny candy to crayon colors, or she'll just give details above and beyond the call of duty, like this passage from page 114, where Oreo is looking for a place to sleep for the night. She found that Riverside Park's major drawback as a campsite was that it was long and narrow. It was flanked on the west by the Hudson River and the West Side Highway. Because of its narrowness, it had been difficult for Oreo to find a secluded spot, away from children, dogs, bicycle riders, tennis players, joggers, lovers. I've posted a link to a JSTOR article written by Kathryn Hume. She's professor of English at Penn State University, and she uses Oreo as an example of a speedy narrative. And what I found helpful was when she described faster narratives as being a narrative that provides too much material in terms of detail, and that's certainly true of Oreo. The first 10 pages introduces 8 characters, 3 generations of Oreo's family on both sides, and then it breaks up the text with 13 subheadings, plus the skin color table that you've just seen earlier. But then Hume goes on to say that a speedy narrative also feels faster because it provides too little information, too little of a certain kind of information, that sort of mundane information that helps maintain the illusion of reality, and the transition from one event to another. And I'm going to quote her here. One way for a writer to achieve speed is to cut out the narrative material a traditional reader expects to provide what John Gardner's Grendel calls a gluey wine of connectedness. When the details that stabilize fictional reality are absent, those trained in conventional literature feel that absence as an artifact of speeding along too fast. Ross ostentatiously calls attention to cutting such detail. She remarks, "There is no weather per se in this book. Passing reference is made to weather in a few instances. Assume whatever season you like throughout. Summer makes the most sense in a book of this length. That way, pages do not have to be used up describing people taking off and putting on overcoats." Does this novel fit a genre label? No, Oreo is never going to fit in a single genre. It literally sprawls across a number of definitions. It's a superhero's tall tale, as we've already talked about. It's like a 17th century bawdy satire, and it nods to James Joyce and Ulysses because it's reworking the myth of Theseus, and it does name drop Stephen Dedalus. And it reminded me often of, what's the book I read? The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. So a bit of gonzo journalism. And it's also black and queer and feminist literature. So all that in just 212 pages. I love my next question. It says, is there anything that stands out about this novel? Oreo stands out as a novel. I was in no doubt as I read that I was in the presence of an energetic and passionate intellect. And I wondered whether the narrator was ever talking about the author as much as about Oreo when they said on page 93, she was ready for any kind of shit, prepared to go where she was not wanted, to butt in where she had no business, to test her mettle all over the map. Oreo was one pushy chick. Her bravery was beyond question. The New York Times, that same newspaper which ignored Oreo when it was first published, now they write glowingly about the republished book. And I don't know, are they trying to give themselves a get-out clause when they say, quote, "It may have been first published more than 40 years ago, but its time is now." Well, a shame that no one was as brave as Fran Ross in 1974 to recognize an author that now they're calling path-breaking and sublime. So now that you know that, when I ask the question, is there problematic content in this book? Oreo aims to be problematic. It is pushy, just like the protagonist. And the book was written in the 1970s, so it's got 1970s sensitivity levels. There's really no point reading it unless you feel prepared for whatever you might read, however offensive or obscene. And to put it in context, I say this because the book it's deliberate in its anarchy and its rebellion. The period between 1968 and 1975 was revolutionary time. It was the emergence of gay pride, black power, the second wave feminist movement. Old authority structures were all being challenged, and anything that seemed to be associated with old social or cultural norms, that was just a target waiting to be shot down. And while it's a funny book, the humor is razor sharp, and you can tell that there is anger behind it. I found it enervating in the way that all superhero stories are enervating. The world right now seems full of bullies, personalities that you don't even have to exaggerate, do you? Right? They could drop right into a comic book now and they would make perfect villains. And I could just imagine an Oreo taking them all on and winning. And that felt really good. Right. Any suggestions for related or follow-up reading? Well, at first, I didn't have the foggiest idea what to recommend when I finished Oreo. I felt like being pushy, just like the protagonist. I felt like saying, just please read Oreo. It's amazing. But that's not the spirit of this section of my reviews. So instead, I asked Google, I said, Google, tell me the name of another Black woman novelist. I'm still pretty early on in my reading of Black literature, so pretty good chance they'd give me a name I'd never heard of, somebody that I could discover. And so my recommendation, which is as much to me as it is to all of you, is to try Jessie Redmond Fawcett, who was part of that creative surge that we now call the Harlem Renaissance. And she's written 6 different novels, so I had a lot to choose from, and it just so happens that The Chinaberry Tree caught my eye, so I'm saying, hey, let's start there. And that's another review done. Now, you may know a few days ago I mentioned that I've reached the 300 subscriber mark. In fact, this morning the count is standing at 310. It's like, hey, calm down, guys, calm down. So good. I wanted a way to say thank you to everybody, and also thank you to everybody who saw my little poll and voted in it. The majority of you wanted some kind of combination of answering questions and giving a biography. Now, I think I could do that without resorting to that kind of boring, I was born in 1964 in January in a prairie snowstorm, although that's actually true about me. But if you have a question, put it in the comments here, but don't feel any pressure, because what I'm thinking of, it can work even if we only get a couple of questions or one question. It doesn't matter. I'll work it in with what I'm going to talk about, and also I can work it into sort of a holiday seasoned type theme thing. Anyway, so that's going to air on Thursday, the 19th of December, just a few days before the winter solstice, because I'm going to tie it in with the lyrics to A Christmas Carol, kind of. Anyway, the next video will be a tag. Myself and Meg from Books Off the Beaten Path, we've come up with another original tag idea. We're going to call it A Week in the Life, and we think you'll really like it, okay? So until then, though, everybody, merry reading to one and all. Take care. Bye-bye.